Hi there. Today on Lydia's Books, I want to talk about All the Fiends of Hell by Adam L.G. Nevill. This is an April 2024 book. I am late coming to it, and it seems that he has graced us with a book every 2 years lately, so I'm getting to Monumental soon. But this came out from Ritual Limited, which is his publishing house that he runs. I don't know there are other titles under Ritual Limited, I'm positive. But I really love the cover. I've talked about the cover before, and I talked about the cover a bit when I talked about the cover for Monumental. It's this style that he has curated. The fonts used on the cover I thought were Baskerville, which is one of my favorites, and this is probably based on it. It turned out to be a font called Celestia Antica. Samuel Arrea did the art, and Peter Marsh did the design of this cover, and I believe that's the same for other books by Adam Nevill. I wanted to read more from Adam Nevill because I love The Ritual. I love the film, of course, but I was well aware of the writer after hearing him talk on This Is Horror podcast. He's a self-published or hybrid author, and that really appeals to and fascinates me. And he has this very down-to-earth style of storytelling. We also have a proclivity for a similar design because some of my books look a little similar. When Brittany recommended this book a few months ago, I bought it right away, and his new book is coming soon, so I wanted to kind of get into the Nevill headspace. So thank you, Brittany, for recommending this. As touched on previously, there is a short story of mine called Shrinking Dwell, which kind of works as, I don't know, a story going on at the same time, or maybe it was someone who was awake at the time. It doesn't have to do with a pandemic, but it has to do with the timing of bells heralding some sort of apocalypse. And it is also quite hellish. It has more biblical ideas in that short story than does the book, but the idea of a rapture being heralded by bells, you can't, dance around that is slightly religical, right? So yeah, if you're interested, I do have all the copies of Pray Light Eve in a PDF form for bookworms on my Patreon, but if you'd like to read it, you can feel free to pick up a copy at Amazon. I'll leave links below. There's links on my website, of course. Or just ask me nicely and I'll send you a copy so that you can compare, especially if you're an Adam Nevill fan and have read this and really like this book. I would be very interested in your opinion on the similarities, if it's just me. I don't know. But anyhow, thank you, Brittany, for sending the recommendation to read this. Now, what sort of horror is this? Is it religious horror? No, it's not. This is a horror novel, and by subgenre, it is a post-apocalyptic, or survival horror. And I like 0-day stories, so it is more of that I would classify this as. What I was surprised about here is that there's no typical Fiends of Hell. I'm a little tainted, a little biased with all the Diablo that I play, and how interesting that the concept of hell is to me. The idea of a Fiend of Hell conjures up a very specific creature in my mind, and these were something entirely different. That's not all bad, because this is kind of a science fiction book, right? The apocalypse that has to do with these Fiends of Hell seem to be of an alien origin. The Red Night of Bells heralds a global catastrophe, annihilation on a biblical scale. That's right on the back cover, so you can see why we would think it's biblical. Seeing the morning is no blessing, the handful of scattered survivors are confronted with blood-red skies and an infection of predatory horrors that never originated on Earth. An occupying force intent on erasing the remnants of animal life from the planet. Across the deserted landscapes of England, bereft of infrastructure and society, the overlooked can either hide or try to outrun the infernal hunting terrors, until a rumor emerges claiming that the sea may offer an escape. Ordinary, unexceptional, directionless Carl is one of the few who make it through the first night. In the company of 2 orphans, he flees south, but only into horrifying revelations of the greater peril, where a transformed world and expanding race of ravening creatures await. Driven to the end of the country and himself, he must overcome alien and human malevolence and act in ways that were unthinkable mere days before. This was an enjoyable read, and it only took me 3 sittings, as I was quite enraptured, no pun intended. The pace of this book ticks along really well, and there's no real slump to be had. A little near the end, when they're chasing a certain man, it does get a little slow as they visit town after town with no luck, but otherwise I felt extremely comfortable with the pace of this. And maybe that like slow slump is good, because you need to catch your breath at some point, right? Even though there is a lot of quiet time and up and down, so you do have action and rest throughout this book. I think there is a creature comfort too, with the mentions of hot sweet tea is mentioned a couple of times, even from the beginning of this book, or searching for a safe place to sleep and what food they can eat and find in these abandoned houses and towns. Now, I'm not a middle-aged man who is divorced and has had in vitro fertilization failures or whatever. I'm a person who is alive, however, on planet Earth, and I've lived through the pandemic, which figures quite largely here. And this is where this begins. The illness is similar, without naming it as such, which may prove really good in the long run, similar to the COVID pandemic. That is how some people have survived this rapture. Everyone who is sick at the time of the visitation from aliens makes it through alive, while still sick with a bad cold and semi-delirious from cough syrup, sure, but they're alive. So if you think about the people that you knew that were ill, not during the pandemic, after the initial strains, after the vaccine had done a few rounds, it was not too often that people got sick. So it wasn't like teeming masses. It was just a few people. So not many people made it through the rapture either, as far as we know. The story occurs without a lot of input from the wider world. And that's something I love about 0 Days stories, whether it be this sort of alien invasion or like zombie stories or like, I don't know, environmental impact of some sort, when you're really cloistered, right? So we can't be sure of who's dead and who's alive. So the main character is Carl, and someone who we can get very comfortable with. I think the last time I felt this comfortable with somebody that I met shuffling around their kitchen in the morning groggily is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it differs from that quite a lot. And it differs from, say, Shaun of the Dead, where we spend a lot of time getting to know the environment and what's around town. This is a much smaller village that Carl lives in, and it seems we only get to know the street that Carl lived on, where there's a lot of abandoned houses. His neighbor Katie lives across the street, and every other town seems to be just like this. While we traverse a map fleeing the spreading red sky that heralds these creatures, to the south, toward the sea, we don't get a lot of the lay of the land. We get place names, maybe a major highway, but every town is really a stand-in for that exact street that Carl lived on. So we get a good idea of the empty roads, empty streets, empty buildings, and that's all we really need, in my estimation. We visit a hospital, an elder care home, and a hotel, maybe other than that. We don't go into a lot of other buildings because everything is, as you can imagine, terrifying to go into. I wouldn't want to go into a lot of these buildings, but without the vegetation and having a whole lot of time elapsed since the event, fans of Last of Us would enjoy this, because it does involve that sort of sneaking around these abandoned places. Urban exploration, as it is, fans of that sort of horror would be at home here. And of course, fans of alien invasion stories, like War of the Worlds, or Tony Burgess's amazing novel Pontypool Changes Everything, where you don't see what's descending on the survivors, where not everything is described perfectly because they're running from these things. They will not stand around and describe them to us. But when they become brave and they've studied their habits, we get a slow reveal of what these things look like. It's very natural. Now, this could be any town, anywhere, although it is a small town in the southwest of England, and the population would be very low. So I don't know England very well, and I would not say that this novel is necessarily transportive, which is something I love in horror novels, like take us to that place. And if I visited it, that's a plus, because like, why in horror? I really like horror set in Pennsylvania, so I enjoy being able to envision the place and link it to a story. When I visited it, it makes it so much more immersive. But for places that I've not been, like New York City, I also have a good idea, because many stories are also set in that same location. And this doesn't take me to the southwest of England, and I've not visited there, but it does take me back to a time when I wish I lived in something like the southwest of England, slightly cloistered and away from the mad crush of people getting sick with illnesses. And now we're staring down the barrel of an edge case of hantavirus infecting people right now unexpectedly. So I would love to live in a town or city or village that has a population of like 150 people. Our main character, Carl, starts out as a very everyman guy, and it's not like he suddenly busts out into the last action hero. We go on a really slow journey with Carl, and I've seen reviews of this showing him as incompetent or foolish or maddening, and I don't agree with any of that. I enjoyed following around somebody who I can relate to, the same sort of alacrity as me, the same amount of weapons as me, maybe the same sort of vague idea of emergency preparedness as most of us. And he's just like a regular dude doing the best he can. He's also not a total drama queen or tragic story. You know, he's got his hang-ups, he's got his problems, he's got his regrets, but he's not so wildly fictional that we can't relate to this. The idea of reluctantly helping other people sits well with me too, and I think he struggles with that. We get the sense that he'd rather just be away from these people, probably because he's been kind of abandoned through his own life, through other people, right? So he's learned to cope, so just being on his own. Even though he's suffocating in loneliness, he's come to terms with it at this point. For better or worse. And I think that pushing through his reluctance to help other people, not to get a good guy badge, but just so that he can feel that he's left people in an okay state, where he was sort of abandoned in a not okay state, he wouldn't want to do that to other people. I think he wanted to kind of just leave these kids that he finds, these orphans, Jake and Haley, in an okay place. He wants to take his neighbor and put her in an okay place so that he can't be blamed and he can just go off and be alone, which is what he's used to. Now, Carl is the main character, but I keep alluding to Katie, his neighbor, across the road, and she's not really in the book a lot. I was just struck by this character, as I'm sure a lot of people who have read this are, because it's his elderly neighbor and everyone else has been taken, right? So there's no one else left in the village to help care for her. And it seems that Katie is this elderly woman who is on her own, riddled with dementia and bed sores, and there's nothing he can really do. Now, while people are being raptured and there are survivors left over, he brought her some food and was checking on her and hoping that her caregiver would return when he thought other people would return. Although that is a futile notion that he discovers pretty quickly. But I think he feels okay with having left Katie. Sorry, and didn't fall probably into the clutches of another scavenger, because he's pretty much kept his eye on the comings and goings of the road through a fugue state, because he's still sick with a cold through a lot of the book. And she did not just die of neglect. So I think that that is the best case scenario for Katie. And it teaches us right away about his reluctance that Carl has to keep other people under his wing and a need to kind of leave them in an okay spot. And I'm saying an okay spot to avoid saying in a better place or the worst case scenario, because he doesn't wish ill will on any of these people, right? He's totally fine with being left in an okay place, because that's exactly where he was left. I think one of my only complaints with this book was there was a point in the beginning where Carl's kind of describing himself, and he says something to the effect of, why is it that he finds himself holding too many things in his hands at once and trying to do something else? And I myself have this problem sometimes. You know, you're juggling a book and a cup of coffee and you go to open a door. Like, why not just put one of the things down, or plan this out better, or make 2 trips, like something like that. It's sort of a personality quirk he's picked up on himself, and he can't like figure out how to otherwise describe it. And I'm sure there's a psychologist in the room that can describe what that problem is. Is it middle child syndrome? Like, I don't know. I'm not a middle child, but I'm just tossing something out there because I'm not a psychologist. But it's an interesting thing, and there didn't seem to be too many points in the book where he was juggling too many things. Like, maybe juggling the kids and the idea of abandonment and the need for shelter. Like maybe that was what he felt he was holding on to. There is a time when he does sort of fumble something, but it's not driven home, I don't think. So yeah, I was like waiting for a point where he was like, there I go again, holding too many things while trying to open a door. Just something very basic like that. So I don't know if I missed it or what. If anyone else has picked up on that through the book and knows what I mean, let me know. The people he encounters, like Bob and Jake and Haley, are the end of it, right? They're the only people that seem to be alive. He only encounters maybe one or two other people. There's a nurse that he bumps into, and another woman later on who owns a boat. It's very few people, though. We meet the nurse briefly near the beginning of the book, and the woman on the boat briefly near the end. The rest of the book occurs with this push and pull against this bully, Bob, who has his ideas about like, hey, everyone follow me, I'm the leader, and this is how we're going to make it out of this. And he meets Jake and Haley. Jake and Haley are very interesting, and they offer like a really good touchstone away from the adult world of let's survive and get through us, because they're kids. They're younger kids, and they're kind of like chav type kids who are gorging themselves on junk food. Jake is maybe 12, I think, if I recall correctly. He's the oldest, and he's trying to keep a lot of the dangerous edge of this situation from his younger sister and sort of just make sure she's fed and distracted and not crying for their mom all the time. He's an interesting character because he is stoic, quiet, and terrified. So I think it comes across really well because somebody has to be on guard here. Somebody has to be scared out of their wits. Someone has to be scurrying off into the shadows away from these creatures. Like, maybe some people would. I mean, maybe I would. I don't know. The worst case, you would say that he didn't know how to write this character, and that's why he keeps them very quiet and stoic, because it's tough to write kids. Like, even if that were the case, I think it would be fine because it works, right? Haley's all right as well. She's kind of youngish, but her dialogue fits. And that's one complaint that I see a lot of people have when encountering kids in horror that isn't a story about children, is that sometimes their dialogue just doesn't fit. It's not age appropriate, or it just sounds like the same tone as every other character. Adam Nevill is really great at differentiating different people and their tones, their cadence, their slang, and so much else really that goes into creating the voice of a character. It's so well wrought in this way. Bob is such a twat. He's written so well that comes across, and like, I'm sure that you've met people like this. I have. They just come across as very dynamic, super gregarious, very outspoken, very leadership oriented, but you can see from a mile off they don't have what it takes, and they're just super annoying. That's Bob. He does remind me of our former mayor here in Ottawa, Larry O'Brien. That's no shade. He just would look a lot like this Larry O'Brien character if Larry O'Brien was an actor. The entities themselves I'll not really describe because I don't want to get into spoiler territory, and I would do a bad job of describing them than to say they're like shimmering, ethereal, indescribable things. And of course, Adam Nevill is a much better writer than I, so he describes them as best he can, or I suppose as best as his characters can describe them. What these creatures look like, I wondered if the creatures look the same to everybody. And I don't know if that's just a hangover from too many horror movies where things look different to other people because of their own nightmares, but they seem to be vaguely described by most people and vaguely similarly described, but I do wonder what they're really seeing. Now, as far as this book being a 0-day invasion road trip, I thoroughly enjoyed how it unraveled from going to the sleepy, quiet, cozy kitchen where the only thing going on is cold medication and hot cups of sweet tea to where we end up. It's just such a great journey, and even though this is set in a really super small area, I think they're going from somewhere like Worcestershire to Devon, which is not super far compared to like a transcontinental US trip or across the wilds of Canada. It's a smallish area relatively, but traversing that area when you're under siege might as well have taken a month. You feel that strained passage of time. You feel that sort of chase while they're also being hunted. It's a very tense feeling for a quiet novel where you spend a lot of time in kitchens deciding what the hell to do next. I could compare this to several other books, like zombie books and zero-day invasion books and books where you're being chased by perhaps an environmental disaster of some sort. It does not come with a one-to-one duplicate or recommendation with another book. And I like that the language is not super challenging either. So it's very accessible, very approachable, kind of quiet, kind of cozy, very violent, scary, very terrifying, zero-day invasion-ish horror. It's hard to categorize because it does straddle a few things, but it straddles them gently. It is just a horror novel, really, I guess, if you want to boil it down like that. It could be set absolutely anywhere. It's not totally rooted in its locale, although the locale offers the idea that if they pass through a lot of these smaller towns, there's not a lot of dead space like in Northern Ontario where you would travel 6 hours. So it's somewhere where there's a lot of little towns close together. So it has that sort of immediacy, like we're going to actually hit another town, even though all of England has almost all entirely been taken over by this force. You also know there's not a lot of England left, right? So if you look on a map, you can see where the southwest of England is. You don't get a lot of area left to go before you end up in the sea. So it does have that ticking time bomb feel, even though it's not a high stakes thriller. So if you like that sort of thriller pretense, a ticking time bomb, with a kind of almost cozy tone, this is definitely a book for you. I mean, it's not like cozy, it's as cozy as the end of the world could be. Now, I've ordered Monumental, his most recent book, which may work well for fans of The Ritual, as I mentioned previously, just judging from the back jacket copy alone. I like that book a lot and the film quite a lot, so Monumental might be somewhere in line with that, where All the Fiends of Hell is something completely different. Again, I'm very happy that this was recommended to me, and yeah, I'm on to other reading right now, but I will be back once I pick up Monumental in a couple weeks. So have you read All the Fiends of Hell? I mean, I really liked it, so I'm very interested to hear if other people have. I know in the comments a lot of the time people do mention that they liked it. Since I said that I was reading it, I've had a few queries about what I thought of it. I'm pretty pleased, so yeah. If you liked it or not, let me know in the comments below. And outside of No One Gets Out Alive, this, of course, I've read The Vessel, I've read Hasty for the Dark, I've read The Ritual, and I'm reading Monumental. Is there something that is also standout? Because I don't mind picking up a whole bunch of Adam Nevill to line my shelves. Thank you so much for watching, and have an ooky, spooky day.